Good morning.
Good morning.
It's great to be here. Hi, everybody. The title of my talk today is Jiyu-Kennett's Not Bigger, Not Smaller. And this is a koan from a book called The Hidden Lamp, subtitled Stories from 25 Centuries of Awakened Women, edited by Florence Kaplow and Susan Moon. And I'm going to start by reading the entire koan. It's on your program, but in incredibly small print, because we wanted to get it all on there. So I will read it aloud to start. A person asked, "What is minor enlightenment?" Master Jiyu-Kennett said, "A what?" The person continued, "A minor kensho, a minor satori." Jiyu-Kennett replied, "Enlightenment is enlightenment. Sometimes the glimpses are big and sometimes they are small, but it is still one and the same thing. Don't think that the enlightenment is bigger or smaller." The questioner continued, "I had the impression that once you got enlightenment, you got it." Jiyu-Kennett said, "Once you have realized it, you will always know it. But if you don't keep your training up, heaven help you. You'll be worse off than you were before. It's not something that you get. It's not something that you keep for eternity. Training, as Dogen says, is enlightenment. This is why Shakyamuni Buddha always carried his begging bowl and always wore his robe. A lot of people think, why didn't he just sit back and enjoy it? Enlightenment isn't something you have, it's something you are, something you do." So first, I'd like to say thanks to the student who read through this koan with me, helped me work my way through it, and also the student who read with me a significant portion of Jiyu-Kennett's book, Zen is Eternal Life. So this koan mentions enlightenment, and whenever I talk about enlightenment, I like to offer a disclaimer, because practice is different for everyone. The course of practice is different for everyone, really different. And the deepening of practice is not necessarily dramatic. And many times I've used the example, which is common, I think, among Zen teachers, that there can be sudden events that deepen our understanding, and there can also be slower, quieter, gradual events. And the simile for that is, it's like going out into the morning fog wearing your robes. At some point, you realize that your robes are soaked through, but you couldn't say when it happened because it happened very gradually. So there's no right way for the deepening of practice to happen. And that in itself, I think, is a pretty good reason not to talk about enlightenment very much. Because if you do, based on what you know of other people's experiences, you may begin to speculate about how your experience should be. And you might get an idea of how your experience should be that just isn't meant to be for you, because yours is going to be yours. It won't be like anyone else's because it comes from within you. And so thinking about the experience of others can actually just impede your practice. So why do I talk about it? Well, because it keeps coming up. We have all of these old stories about something happens between the student and the master, and suddenly the student gets enlightened. And we can get so hung up on this idea. We can get hung up on the idea of attaining something. I've got to get this thing. I've got to get this thing and have it. Kind of like the student in this koan that I just read. So I'm talking about enlightenment, so hopefully we can stop thinking about enlightenment. Have no designs on becoming a Buddha, Dogen said. So what I'd like to do first today is provide some background on this koan, and then I'll go through it and explain it a bit line by line. So the reason I chose this koan today is because I think it helps me to get to the heart of what this experience is about, and also to some impediments, difficulties with practice, things that can distract us, that we can talk about and maybe let go of. So the teacher in this koan is Jiyu-Kennett, and first I'm going to talk about her. She is not a person I ever met, so everything I'm telling you is from what I've read about her. Ho-un Jiyu-Kennett, born in 1924, died in 1996. So she died at the age of 72 or so, about 26 years ago. She was British. She grew up in England. She studied medieval music as a young person. When she was a young woman, she wanted to be a priest in the Church of England, but women were not allowed to be priests. So she couldn't do that. She became disillusioned with Christianity. She began to study Theravadan Buddhism. She met D.T. Suzuki, not Shunryu Suzuki, D.T. Suzuki, who was a Rinzai master. And Rinzai, unlike our practice, Soto Zen, Rinzai puts a lot of emphasis on koan study and also on sudden enlightenment experiences. I think you could say that about Rinzai. So she was interested in Rinzai, but ultimately she chose Soto Zen, which is our path. And she said that Soto Zen followed mainly the Indian tradition and was the religion of the ordinary person, man or woman. Dogen proclaimed that there was no difference between the meditations of a man and a woman, a rich person and a poor one, everyone being able to find peace and freedom if they truly sought it. It is because of its apparently simple approach, the very opposite to me of the approach of Rinzai, that I have chosen Soto for myself. And so, yeah, I think these words of Dogen probably appealed to her because apparently she ran into quite a lot of gender discrimination in her Zen studies. And she also considered Soto Zen to be more democratic. She said, there's a Japanese saying that Rinzai is for the generals and Soto is for the farmers. It would appear that Rinzai is much better known for its religious arts than for its genuine spiritual help for the ordinary man and woman. Soto Zen teaches the way for every living person, no matter what they do. The farmer can apply Soto Zen to their daily life just as much as can the Queen of England or the President of the United States. So that appealed to her. And she was ordained in the Soto Zen school in 1962. She studied in Japan for over 7 years. She received Dharma transmission twice. She was foreign guest master at Soji Temple in Yokohama, which means she was in charge of helping Westerners who showed up in Japan to study. So she was the first woman to be sanctioned by the Soto Zen school to teach in the West. In 1970, she founded Shasta Abbey in California, first Zen monastery in the United States to be founded by a woman. With one interruption, which was due to health, she was abbess of Mount Shasta until 1996, when she died. And Dharma Rain Zen Center in Portland, Oregon, which is a big Soto Zen center and a major center, is in her lineage. She also founded the Order of Buddhist Contemplatives, which has chapters in a number of countries. Her name Jiyu means compassionate friend. Sounds a lot like Jiryu, which means compassion dragon, but it's a little different. And she was a bit controversial. There was a period of illness during which she had a lot of visions, which she wrote about. And people in Zen are of mixed feelings about visions. And some people dismiss them as makyo, illusion. By all accounts, she was an imposing presence. She was a large person and very assertive. James Ford, whom I have met, said this about her: "My memories of Jiyu-Kennett Roshi as a teacher are mixed. She followed in the authoritarian style of her Japanese inheritance. Interpersonally, she was remarkably invasive. Indeed, in my 20s, she pushed me into a marriage with another student that would cause great unhappiness for both of us. On the other hand, she had genuine insight into the boundless realm and also pushed me toward my own deepest experience of the great matter." So yeah, wow, that's quite a thing. If I would never do something like push a student into a marriage. If your teacher is remarkably invasive, it's time to take stock. And hopefully that is something that is happening much less these days. So her authoritarian style, it could be because she was trained in Japan, or maybe it just came naturally to her. But I also wonder if it could have a little bit to do with her time in history, because she was the only female teacher in that initial generation of Zen teachers in the US. That includes Shunryu Suzuki, Katagiri, who founded this temple, Maizumi Roshi, and Kobun Chino, and maybe a few others. But most Soto Zen teachers in this country, I think, are in the lineage of one of those 4 teachers or of Jiyu-Kennett Roshi. And she's also, so she was the only female in the group and the only one who wasn't Japanese. And I just wonder if maybe she felt a little pressure to sort of be as tough as the men, you know, because this practice can have a bit of a macho side to it. Not so much here. We are really diminishing that, I think. But that's kind of happened to first generation women in other settings, I think, like in business, you know, that first generation of women feel that they have to be sort of really, really tough in that way. So I don't know, it's just speculation on my part. But she did say that she ran into a lot of sexism in Japan and there were people who hated her there. So, but anyway, she did it. And she's one of the great women ancestors. And like Suzuki and Maizumi and Katagiri, I don't know much about Kobun Chino, she was an imperfect person. And we must be careful about our teachers, keeping in mind their imperfections, not surrendering to them completely, while still valuing their teachings. So I'm going to go through this. The source of this koan is her book called Roar of the Tigress. A person asked, "What is minor enlightenment?" Master Jiyu-Kennett said, "A what?" The person continued, "A minor kensho, a minor satori." So first, I think we should address these terms a little bit. Enlightenment, kensho, satori. So the way the student says this, it sounds to me like, yeah, you know, enlightenment, kensho, satori, they're all the same thing. Indicates that the student thought of the 3 things as being the same. Well, is that true? Well, various sources say yes and no. I think the way that people use these terms is really all over the place. I looked at some dictionaries for this. The Oxford Dictionary of Buddhism says that enlightenment is the common English translation of the Sanskrit word bodhi, which really means awakening, not enlightenment. And some people prefer the term awakening. Enlightenment can be associated with the Western Age of Enlightenment in the 17th and 18th centuries. That can be confusing. And I like awakening better, because if I'm awake, I'm doing something. If I'm enlightened, I have something. And spoiler alert, that's kind of where this talk is going. As Jiyu-Kennett said, enlightenment is not about having something, it's about doing something. So the Shambhala Dictionary of Buddhism and Zen says of enlightenment, in a profound experience, it becomes clear that emptiness and phenomena, absolute and relative, are entirely one. The experience of true reality is precisely the experience of this oneness. Then it quotes the Heart Sutra, form is no other than emptiness, emptiness is no other than form. So we're talking about an experience where this stuff comes to you deeply, and it's beyond words. It's much deeper than words. And it's something, as I said, that can happen kind of dramatically, and it can happen very suddenly. And actually, it happens all the time to all of us. We just don't notice it. And then this dictionary goes on to say that in profound enlightenment, the ego is annihilated. It dies. Thus, it is said in Zen, you have to die on the cushion. So be forewarned. But it goes on to say, the results of this dying, of this great death, is great life, a life of freedom and peace. So there are big deaths, there are little deaths, they happen all the time. So these same two dictionaries both say that kensho and satori are the same as enlightenment. Kensho literally means seeing nature. One of them says it's just the Zen expression for enlightenment. Kensho and satori have the same meaning. But I know there are other points of view as well, suggesting that there are differences. And the Shambhala dictionary goes on to say, it is customary to use the word satori when speaking of the enlightenment of the Buddha or the Zen patriarchs, and to use the word kensho when speaking of an initial enlightenment experience that is still required to be deepened. So kensho, kind of a minor experience. And that's consistent with what I've heard. I think many people talk about kensho as kind of this initial experience when someone for the first time kind of gets out of themselves. They have a glimpse of interdependence, sort of their first intuitive understanding that they do not exist apart from other things. And another source, the Encyclopedia of Buddhism, says, Zen Buddhist training does not end with kensho. Practice is to be continued to deepen the insight and to express it in daily life. So clearly that source also thinks of kensho as an initial experience. It goes on to quote Chan Master, the contemporary Chan Master Sheng Yen, who indicates that the process is never complete. Chan expressions refer to enlightenment as seeing your self-nature, but even this is not enough. After seeing your self-nature, you need to deepen your experience even further and bring it into maturation. You should have enlightenment experience again and again and support them with continuous practice. Even though Chan says that at the time of enlightenment, your outlook is the same as the Buddha, you are not yet a full Buddha. Then satori, which means literally to know, but it has nothing to do with conventional knowledge. The Oxford Dictionary says there are various degrees of satori. Another source says, customarily satori is used to refer to full deep experience of enlightenment, such as that of the Buddha, while kensho is used to refer to that first experience. So the point here, we don't need to go further into this debate, but the student in this koan appears to believe that they are the same, but there are there are degrees of enlightenment. It's a little muddled. And so we have this split going on here. Are they the same, or are there degrees? And I think what this koan does is it tells us why both of these things can be true at the same time. Jiyu-Kennett replied, enlightenment is enlightenment. Sometimes the glimpses are big and sometimes they are small, but it is still one and the same thing. Don't think that the enlightenment is bigger or smaller. So that's the answer. There are not degrees of what you're seeing. It is the same thing. It is one thing, kind of a thingless thing. It is the interdependence of all things. It is sort of the absence of an organizing principle for the same thing. It is there-ness, thusness, which is right here continually arising all of the time. So there are not degrees of enlightenment. There's just that thing. There are, however, degrees of clarity with which one can view enlightenment. So a person cannot be partially enlightened. If you spend a moment in true practice, say you're sitting on your cushion, being fully present with what's going on, with no mental distraction, you are fully enlightened in that moment. There's no degree. There's only full enlightenment. The degrees come in because you might glimpse it for only a short time. Maybe later you'll be able to glimpse it more consistently. So that means that you yourself, in that moment, have been fully enlightened, whether you believe it or not. It may have been so quick that you didn't even notice it. But there's another deeper reason why you may not have noticed it, because by definition, that moment of enlightenment is when you are not present. You weren't there to see it. Enlightenment is the removal of you. It's only later that small mind recognizes that for what it is. And the Shambhala dictionary is pretty good talking about this. Although enlightenment by its nature is always the same, nevertheless, there are quite different degrees of this experience. If we compare the process to breaking through a wall, then the experience can vary between a tiny hole in the wall, a small kensho, and the total annihilation of this wall, as in the complete enlightenment of Shakyamuni Buddha, and all the degrees in between. The differences in clarity and accuracy of insight are enormous, even though in both cases the same world is seen. The questioner continued, I had the impression that once you got enlightenment, you got it. So now the questioner is coming from a different direction. I think they're saying basically, okay, you say the glimpses can be big or small, but I thought there was just one big enlightenment that would change you for all time. And this gives Jiyu-Kennett a chance to talk about what she perceives as the student's fundamental problem, which is viewing enlightenment as something to be acquired. Jiyu-Kennett said, this is the rest of it, once you have realized it, you will always know it, but if you don't keep your training up, heaven help you. You'll be worse off than you were before. It's not something that you get. It's not something that you keep for eternity. Training, as Dogen says, is enlightenment. This is why Shakyamuni Buddha always carried his begging bowl and always wore his robe. A lot of people think, why didn't he just sit back and enjoy it? I'm listening to the cardinal. Enlightenment isn't something you have, it's something you are, something you do. So there's a lot there. Once you have realized it, you will always know it. Once you have connected with big mind, then even if small mind comes back in, you'll know it's there. You'll know there's something there that can be seen. Once you've connected with big mind in a deeper way, you may be able to summon it at will. But if you don't keep your training up, heaven help you, you'll be worse off than you were before. And I've actually experienced something like this. When I had the deepest and most sudden deepening of my practice in my life, there were some unusual circumstances which caused me to kind of stop meditating for a while, not too long after that happened. And that was rough. That was rough because small mind came back in and it was pretty hard to integrate it. And I think that integration period took me a lot longer because I really stopped, because I really pulled back on my practice. So there's a commentary in this book, The Hidden Lamp, written by Hyla Downey, who's a person who received teaching permission from Korean master Sung San. She teaches in Europe, the US, and South Africa, where she lives. And she said, she would say that kensho, satori, and enlightenment are a doing, a way of life, not things or states, and can be likened to looking through a pinprick hole in a rice paper screen when all at once we see that which was previously hidden. But unless we continue to meticulously clear the viewing hole through sustained and ongoing practice and the deepening of our insight, eventually this view will diminish, returning us to a state of darkness, hunger, thirst, and attachment caused by our deluded thinking. And we always do this. It's like, oh, I've got it now, I can relax. And then it goes away. Continuous practice. Don't try to hang on to the thing. Let it go, come back to the moment. That's how you got there. It's because you let it go. Keep letting it go. It's not something that you get. It's not something that you keep for eternity. Training, as Dogen says, is enlightenment. Or as it's often said, practice and enlightenment are the same. We get that from Dogen, who is the most towering figure in Soto Zen. And that's pretty radical and pretty hard to take in, that practice and enlightenment are the same. Because that says, if you're just sitting here on the cushion and you're meditating and you have a moment where you're just being here, just being present, no mental distraction, that is enlightenment. And that's pretty radical and pretty strange, because we don't really want to hear that, because we want it to be more dramatic. We want it to be something that stays. You know, the idea of just sort of again and again, we're going to just be here. It sounds kind of boring. But it's not boring. It's not boring if you just let it happen moment after moment. If you just let whatever it is come in, might be ecstatic, might be horrible, but you know what? It's gone again in a minute because you let it go. Let it go again and again and again. You just let it go. So we need to be reminded of this because we have all of these grandiose ideas about what enlightenment is. That's a thing, that we can get it, and then we'll be set. And the thing I like best about Hyla Downey's commentary, I love this, she puts a question for the reader at the end. What would change in your heart if enlightenment wasn't a noun after all? If enlightenment wasn't a noun. That would mean I can't have enlightenment because it's not a thing. I can only do it as a verb. I can only go around enlightenmenting. I can't go around being enlightened. I can only do enlightenment. I can only do enlightened activity. The cardinal and the sirens. There's nothing for me to get at all. That's the heart of the matter of our practice. Right now, I can't get something from this moment, but I can be present in the moment. I can do this moment. And it's only when we give up all of our ideas of getting, having, keeping something that we can really be open to the moment. By definition, enlightenment is something you can't have. Enlightenment is the act of not having anything. Enlightenment is the act of not having anything. So the act of letting go of that idea that you can get something is practice. It is enlightenment. The very act of letting go of wanting is enlightenment. The moment you stop wanting, that is enlightenment. But at the same time, people sometimes do have experiences that change them. But the only thing is, you can't want that. Only when that idea is obliterated can you have that experience. And when you get that experience, if you do, that experience, it changes you for all time. It's not your experience, because you aren't there. It's the experience of absence of you. It's a giving up of you. It's not something that happens to you. It happens to all beings. It happens to all beings together. So here's a very short poem by Dogen, which says that it all goes on without you, because you're not there, right? Coming, going, the waterfowl leaves not a trace, nor does it need a guide. Coming, going, the waterfowl leaves not a trace, nor does it need a guide. And there's a poem by Mary Oliver that kind of says the same thing. A little poem called I Go Down to the Shore. I go down to the shore in the morning, and depending on the hour, the waves are rolling in or moving out. And I say, oh, I am miserable. What should I do? And the sea says in its lovely voice, excuse me, I have work to do. The universe goes on without you. It doesn't need you. But that's not the whole story either. Once you realize that the universe doesn't need you, you realize how beautifully and completely and inevitably you fit into the universe. Finally, we have, this is why Shakyamuni Buddha always carried his begging bowl and always wore his robe. A lot of people think, why didn't he just sit back and enjoy it? Enlightenment isn't something you have, it's something you are, something you do. And that's where we'll end. Even the Buddha, the most enlightened person, continued to practice. And there are no big and small enlightenments. There's just practice, day in and out, just practice. Thank you. And yeah, I don't know if folks on Zoom can hear the background, but we have more sirens, another cardinal, and quite a lot of traffic. And it just keeps going. It just keeps going. You can practice with sounds, instead of coming back to your breath, you can just let the sounds come in and let them go again. You do that long enough, you don't even think about what the sounds are. They just come, they just go. That's a good practice. Cardinal helps us. So, does anyone have a comment? Roger?
Well, but somehow or other you magically stopped the airplanes. So you must be some kind of Zen master, because the planes were coming roaring through, and your talk started and no more planes.
Well, thank you. I doubt that, but maybe as a group, we're kind of in sync with the universe and maybe made it happen. How about that? Yeah. Yes.
Well, I just find the idea, rather than boring, I found it really comforting, because as we go through life with practice, we can always get there again. So it just, anyway, I would never say that enlightenment, because it has to be practiced, would be boring, but that the fact that it's always available to me with practice is very comforting.
Yeah, thank you. Let me see if I can rephrase that. I'm not sure if everyone on Zoom was able to hear that, but it's kind of comforting to know that practice and enlightenment are the same, because it's always available. We can always we can always come back to it. Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's true. If we think about this dramatic idea of what I need to be, that just adds to pressure, adds to the pressure. Gee, I failed at meditation today. I didn't have a breakthrough today. Whereas the other point of view is, wow, I sat on my cushion and my mind was running all over the place and I had all these worries and everything. And there were a couple of moments where I let go. So, hey, it was a great meditation. Less pressure. Okay, thanks. Anyone else like to say something? Okay, we can stop there then. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. It's great to be with you.